What happens when one of Hollywood's most iconic space captains meets late-night television's most relentless provocateur? And neither backs down. Tonight, we're breaking down the fiery confrontation that turned a routine interview into late-night history. Security was called, a legend stormed off, and audiences around the world were left stunned. This isn't just another celebrity spat. This is the real story of how a simple book promo turned into one of television's most unforgettable meltdowns. Hit that subscribe button and buckle up, because this one spirals fast. The night started like any other at Jimmy Kimmel Live. The crowd buzzed, cameras rolled. Jimmy straightened his tie and stepped forward with his signature smirk. "Ladies and gentlemen," he grinned. "My next guest needs no introduction. But I'm going to give him one anyway, because that's literally my job," the audience chuckled. "He's boldly gone where no man has gone before, both in outer space and in some truly baffling film roles. Please welcome the one, the only, William Shatner." Applause exploded as Shatner stepped out. At 89, he carried himself like a man still in command, silver hair perfectly styled. Posture strong, smile confident. "Jimmy," he said, shaking the host's hand. "Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure." Kimmel gestured to the chair with exaggerated flair. "The pleasure's mine, Bill. Or should I say Captain Kirk? Or do you prefer Commander Shatner these days, since you've actually been to space now?" "William will be just fine," Shatner replied, taking his seat with practiced grace. "Though yes, the flight was extraordinary. I'm here to talk about that, and my new book that chronicles the experience." "Ah, yes, the book," Kimmel said, holding up a copy. "Boldly Go, Reflections on a Life of Awe and Wonder." He raised an eyebrow. "Catchy. Very... you." Something in his tone made Shatner's expression tighten just a bit. Still, he stayed composed. "It's a deeply personal account," he said, "about seeing Earth from above, from space, not just as a set or a concept, but as something real and fragile. It changes you." "Oh, I bet it does," Kimmel nodded, leaning back. Then his grin sharpened. "But come on, Bill. Really? When you blasted off on that Blue Origin flight, you weren't even a little bit thinking, holy crap, I'm actually doing this Kirk thing for real." The audience laughed, but Shatner didn't. "I was thinking about the privilege of the moment," he replied. "About humanity's place in the cosmos, not about fictional catchphrases." Sure," Kimmel said with mock solemnity. "But did you bring your phaser? Scan for Klingons? Maybe toss out a few live long and prospers while weightless?" Pantomimed a ridiculous version of the Vulcan salute and Kirk's exaggerated gestures. The crowd erupted, but Shatner's smile had vanished. His hands gripped the chair arms, his eyes sharp and unamused. "Jimmy," he said, voice suddenly cold. "I came here to have a real discussion about space exploration, about human progress, not to be turned into a punchline." Kimmel blinked, then raised his eyebrows. "Whoa, who's turning anyone into anything?" "This is a comedy show, Bill. We have fun." He smirked. "Don't tell me Captain Kirk can't take a joke." "I am not Captain Kirk," Shatner snapped. The studio fell silent. "I am William Shatner. I've spent over 70 years building a career based on craft, curiosity, and contribution. I didn't come here to be mocked or reduced to a caricature for your ratings." Kimmel sat still, momentarily stunned. But then, that glint returned to his eye. That predator's smile. "Easy there, Captain," he said slowly, deliberately using the title Shatner had just rejected. "No need to set phases to kill. We're all friends here." Shatner leaned forward. His voice dropped into a razor's edge. "Are we, Jimmy? Because it feels like you lied to my team. You said this would be a real interview about my flight, about the future of space travel, not a setup to turn me into a joke." Kimmel's smile stiffened. Then he leaned in, matching Shatner's tone. "You want serious? Fine, let's get serious. You're 89. You spent 11 minutes in a glorified Amazon-sponsored space bus that barely left the atmosphere. Meanwhile, astronauts are up on the ISS, doing real science, spending months in orbit. But sure, let's all act like you had some profound awakening," sops rippled through the crowd. The atmosphere turned ice cold. Shatner's face flushed. His hands unclenched, then clenched again. And without a word, he stood. The audience held its breath. Security moved, just in case. But Shatner didn't lash out. He didn't yell. He simply looked down at Jimmy Kimmel, eyes burning. "You're not worth the conversation," he said. "Good luck with your jokes." And with that, William Shatner turned and walked off stage, leaving the studio stunned and the internet waiting for the fallout. He leaned forward in his chair, his voice rising with unmistakable fury. That joyride, as you so flippantly call it, represented the culmination of decades of human ingenuity and scientific advancement. It was a privilege, an honor, I'll treasure for the rest of my life. Kimmel scoffed, shaking his head. "Oh, please. It was a publicity stunt. You went up there because someone paid you to. Now you're selling books based on 11 minutes of weightlessness like you're some kind of space pioneer." Shatner's fist clenched. "How dare you?" he growled. "How dare you diminish something that meant everything to me?" The words hit like a phaser blast, hanging in the air with sharp intensity. For a brief second, Kimmel's trademark smirk faltered, but pride and ratings kept him from backing down. The audience sat in stunned silence as two entertainment legends squared off in what was fast becoming late night's most uncomfortable moment in years. Kimmel leaned in, voice dripping with sarcasm. "Oh no," he said mockingly. "Did I hurt the feelings of the great William Shatner, the man who turned overacting into an art form and somehow convinced the world it was genius?" Shatner's face darkened from red to nearly purple. "Overacting?" he echoed, rising in tone. This time not for drama but out of genuine fury. "I created one of the most beloved characters in television history. I gave Captain Kirk life, soul, and meaning. That performance resonated with millions." Kimmel shot back without hesitation. "You gave Captain Kirk a speech impediment and a habit of pausing dramatically, mid-sentence. He mimicked the cadence with exaggerated flair. Let's not pretend your, shall we say, unique delivery was some kind of artistic breakthrough. You talked like that because you couldn't remember your lines." The audience gasped. This was brutal, even by Kimmel's standards. But Shatner didn't flinch. "You want to talk about forgetting lines?" he hissed, eyes blazing. "At least mine were worth remembering. What exactly is your contribution to entertainment, Jimmy? Mocking people who have done more than you ever will? Turning their achievements and struggles into punchlines?" Kimmel let out a sharp laugh, but there was tension in his voice now. "I've been running successful shows for over 2 decades. I've interviewed presidents, movie stars, hell, even washed-up actors who think a glorified elevator ride makes them astronauts. Washed up!" Shatner whispered the words like a threat, and somehow it was more terrifying than shouting. "I was making movies and television while you were still wetting your bed, you smug little parasite." Kimmel seized on the word. "Movies? You mean Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, The one you directed straight into cinematic disaster? Or are we talking about your singing career? Shall we play your legendary take on Lucy in the Sky with diamonds for the audience? The mention of his spoken word album hit like a slap. Shatner's knuckles turned white around the armrests. You smug, self-satisfied little man. He spat. You sit behind a desk and take shots at people who actually have talent. Real talent. Kimmel didn't flinch. Talent? That what we're calling it now? Because from here it looks like you've been riding the wave of one lucky role for 50 years. Kirk was lightning in a bottle, and you've spent a lifetime trying to recreate that magic, and failing. At least I created something that will outlive me. Shatner fired back. What's your legacy going to be? A collection of mean-spirited interviews and recycled sarcasm? Kimmel stood abruptly, leaving the comfort of his desk behind, abandoning any attempt at civility. You think you're better than me? He snapped, voice echoing in the dead silent studio. The standoff had become electric, two giants colliding not in jest, but in raw, unchecked ego. Kimmel's voice turned cold, sharp as a blade. You're a has-been so desperate for relevance, you strapped yourself to a rocket just to get people talking about you again. Shatner shot to his feet. Suddenly, the two men were standing face across the coffee table like gunfighters at high noon. The audience froze, unsure if they were witnessing late-night history or an impending physical brawl. Shatner's voice trembled with fury. Desperate for relevance? I've been relevant longer than you've been alive. I was exploring strange new worlds while you were still trying to figure out which end of the microphone to speak into. Kimmel sneered. Please. You've been playing the same character for decades, because that's all you can do. Even off camera, you can't stop being Captain Kirk. That's not range, William. That's a slow-motion tragedy. Shatner stepped forward, fists clenched. You want to see tragedy? Look in the mirror. You're a second-rate Johnny Carson knockoff, clinging to cheap laughs and petty takedowns because you've got nothing original to say. You tear down legends to make yourself feel taller. Kimmel's face flushed with anger. Second-rate? I've hosted the Academy Awards. I've interviewed presidents and global icons while you've been busy hawking Priceline deals and signing autographs at Comic-Cons. Shatner snapped back, unwavering. Those Comic-Cons are filled with people who understand real entertainment. They appreciate creativity, not like your brain-dead audience, laughing at stale jokes written by interns. Kimmel moved from behind his desk, stepping closer. Juvenile humor? At least I don't speak like I'm having a stroke. Every time I deliver a line, at least I don't need a teleprompter to remember how to breathe. That shot at Shatner's age cut deep. His composure, already threadbare, tore. You arrogant little weasel, he growled. You wouldn't survive 5 minutes doing what I've done. You hide behind writers, editors, and cue cards because you don't have a single original thought in that smug head of yours. Kimmel laughed sharply. Original thoughts? Coming from a guy who's been rehashing the same performance since Nixon? The only thing you've created is a decades-long impersonation of yourself. Shatner roared back. That impersonation changed. Science fiction forever. It inspired real people. Scientists, astronauts, dreamers. What have you inspired, Jimmy? A couple memes and a few pity laughs on Twitter. Kimmel's voice dropped to a venomous whisper. You want to know what your career really inspires? Pity. For a man so terrified of being forgotten that he humiliates himself on national television just to sell a few books. The studio fell deathly quiet. Even the cameras stopped panning, as if afraid to disturb the moment. Shatner stood still, chest heaving, his face a storm of rage. And then he smiled. "You know what, Jimmy?" he said, voice low and unsettlingly, calm. "You're right. My time in the spotlight is coming to a close. But when I'm gone, people will remember me for creating something timeless, something that sparked wonder, joy, imagination. But you, when you're gone, you'll be remembered as the talk show host who was so insecure about his own mediocrity. He spent his entire career tearing down his betters. And that, my friend," Shatner added, leaning in, "is the real tragedy here." Kimmel's expression shifted, from shock to hurt, to something darker. His usual facade was gone. In its place stood a man stripped of charm and dripping with quiet fury. "You want to talk about legacy, William," he said, each syllable sharp and surgical. "Let's talk about your legacy. The one they don't write on posters. The one about how you treated your castmates. Hogging screen time, rewriting scripts for more lines, making life hell on set for everyone else." Shatner's confident smile flickered. "That's not true," he said, voice wavering. "Those are lies. Jealous actors who couldn't accomplish what I did." Kimmel didn't blink. He pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. "Lies, because I've got Leonard Nimoy's autobiography right here. And he had some very interesting things to say about your behavior. Want me to read a few lines for the audience?" Shatner stepped forward, voice raw. "Don't you dare. Leonard was my friend." But now, there was panic in his voice. "We made peace years ago," Shatner said, trying to regain control. "Oh, you mean after he publicly called you out for being impossible to work with?" Kimmel replied coldly, eyes still glued to his phone. "Let's see. What about Nichelle Nichols, Grace Lee Whitney? George Takei's been telling stories about your ego for decades. Should we FaceTime him right now and ask for a few behind-the-scenes memories?" "They're bitter," Shatner snapped back, but his voice was unsteady. "They're just jealous of my success." "Your success?" Kimmel laughed, sharp, cruel. "You mean your success at alienating everyone you've ever worked with? At turning yourself into a walking punchline? At being so desperate for attention that you shot yourself into space just for headlines?" "I earned my place in entertainment history," Shatner insisted, but he was slowly backing away. The fire was fading from his eyes. "Oh, you earned it." Kimmel nodded, stalking forward like a hunter closing in. "You earned your place as the most notorious egomaniac in Hollywood. You know what people call you, William? A cautionary tale. The textbook example of what happens when talent gets swallowed whole by narcissism." "That's enough." Shatner's voice cracked under the weight of the accusation. "I don't have to stand here and listen to this character assassination." "Character assassination?" Kimmel raised his brows mockingly. "I'm not killing your character, William. I'm just describing it. There's a difference." He stepped even closer, lowering his voice. "Let's talk personal life. 3 divorces, public fights with your kids, lawsuits from business partners. What have you really built, aside from a legacy of burned bridges?" Shatner paled. "My personal life is none of your business." "It became my business the moment you sat on my stage and started lecturing me about legacy." Kimmel shot back. "You want to compare? Fine. I've built a show that employs hundreds, raises millions for charity, and brings joy to millions every night. And what have you done lately, besides cling to the ghost of a role you played 50 years ago?" "I've had a career spanning 7 decades, Shatner mumbled, but even he didn't sound convinced anymore. "Yeah," Kimmel said, pressing in. A career built on one character. Everything else? Flops, parodies, forgotten side projects. Your movies bombed. Your music was a meme. Your books gathered dust. And your reality shows. A punchline. "Stop," Shatner whispered. But Kimmel wasn't done. "You know what the real tragedy is? You could have been remembered as a beloved icon. You could have stepped back gracefully. Let Captain Kirk be your legacy. Instead, you chose to be bitter. You chose to lash out at anyone who doesn't kneel at your feet." Shatner's knees gave slightly. He gripped the back of his chair to steady himself. "I said stop." "And that whole space flight stunt?" Kimmel's voice rose now, riding the momentum. "It wasn't inspiring. It was pitiful. A 90-year-old man risking his life just to trend for a day." "Enough!" Shatner roared. But the sound wasn't fierce. It was broken. The bark of a wounded man, not a legend. "I don't have to take this from a hack who makes a living mocking people better than him." "Better?" Kimmel laughed now, genuinely. "William, look around. This is my studio, my audience, my empire. You're just a has-been clinging to relevance on a show you should have never walked onto." The words struck like a blow. Shatner looked around the room. The lights, the cameras, the silent, frozen audience. And he saw the truth. He was no longer the center of gravity here. Jimmy was. "You're right," Shatner said finally. His voice dropped so low, the crowd had to lean in to hear. "You're absolutely right. I am washed up. I am desperate. And I am pathetic." The room went still. "I came here tonight thinking I still mattered," he continued. "That people still cared about William Shatner. But you've made it crystal clear. I'm just a joke, a relic." "William, I didn't mean—" Kimmel began, a hint of remorse creeping in. Shatner raised a hand to silence him. "No, you meant every word. And maybe you were right. I spent so many years believing, the myth of myself I forgot the truth, that Captain Kirk wasn't mine alone. Writers, directors, cast, crew, they created him. I was just the face." A silence. Even the cameras didn't move. "But you know what, Jimmy?" Shatner's voice found a strange calm. "Even if everything you said is true, even if I am a cautionary tale, I still gave the world something meaningful, something that sparked wonder, inspired generations. Maybe that has to be enough." He straightened, some of the old Captain Kirk posture returning. "I'm leaving. Not because you're kicking me off, but because I still have a shred of dignity left, and I'd like to keep it." He turned to go. "William, wait," Kimmel called after him. "Maybe I went too far." Shatner didn't stop. "No, Jimmy. You went exactly as far as you needed to." He paused at the edge of the stage. "Enjoy your empire, while it lasts. They all fall eventually." And with that, William Shatner walked off the Jimmy Kimmel live stage for the last time, leaving behind a shaken host, a breathless audience, and one of the most unforgettable confrontations in late-night history. As the credits rolled in silence, millions of viewers were left asking, did we just witness the end of a legend or the birth of one? Let me know what you think. Did Jimmy go too far, or did Shatner get what was coming? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more shocking Hollywood showdowns.